به نام خدا و شبتان خوش. به یکی دیگر از برنامه‌های آماج خوش آمدید. امشب دو خبرنگار پاکستانی و دو خبرنگار افغان با خود داریم و پیرامون تهدیدات مشترک، فرصت‌ها و چالش‌هایی که در منطقه وجود داره و میان افغانستان و پاکستان صحبت می‌کنیم. Thank you very much for coming to One TV, all of you. Let's start it with our Pakistani guest, respected Pakistani guest, Mr. Hasan Khan. Hasan Khan, please share with us your major findings in your trip, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the TV1 who's given us this opportunity to share our thoughts as a Pakistani journalist in our trip to Afghanistan. I think this is not the first time, specifically me, is visiting Afghanistan. But in this trip, I think what is the purpose of the trip? It is very, I will call it a sacrosanct type of things. Like we are here to select Afghan journalists and Pakistani journalists who can report in their respective. Like the Pakistani journalists will be coming to Afghanistan, and the Afghani journalists will be coming to Pakistan. So they have that pulse of the ground. They go there and see what is going on in Pakistan, and the Afghani journalists will be coming here. So that is the project, and our interactions with our Afghan friends, with the political leadership of Afghanistan too, there has been that has widened our perspective, because sitting in Islamabad, unfortunately, though we are close to each other, we have a shared history, we have shared ethnicities, we have a shared language and faith, all the things, but unfortunately none of the Pakistani media has any representative in Kabul or elsewhere in Afghanistan, and Pakistan is receiving most of the news from Afghanistan are about Afghanistan through the Western wire services. So all the news coming to Islamabad, they first go to Washington, Paris or London, and then landed at the table in Islamabad. So this is a golden opportunity for us, the Pakistani journalists who are here in Afghanistan. They are interacting with the Afghan counterparts, they are interacting with the Afghan political leaders, and I think it is widening their understanding that what is Afghanistan, what is Kabul, how the Afghanistan political leadership, or what they think about Pakistan, what they think about the reconciliation process, specifically this era of transition which is going on in Afghanistan. So we are watching this whole things right now. We are having this privilege of being privy to the Afghan understanding of the situation. So I understand that this trip is a very vital one, and at a very vital time.
And also you have talked about two processes which is related also to Pakistan, the transition and peace process. You have met with lots of Afghans, journalists, activists and politicians of Afghanistan. How was the perception toward Pakistan, and how did you find them?
I think in Pakistan we have one is a particular view, we call it an establishment view, the Pakistani establishment, which looking at Afghanistan from a particular perspective, and everywhere the establishment have most of the time different view from the independent, like the Pakistani journalist or the Pakistani intelligentsia or intellectual, definitely they have a different view. What is the Pakistani establishment view is there is a fear that maybe this transition, the leaving of when the international forces depart from Afghanistan, so definitely they feel that there will be I think the era of insecurity may come again into Afghanistan, and it may destabilize the bordering region, because Pakistan and Afghanistan share more than 2,500 kilometers of border, and a very vital border, which and it is totally porous. You can't guard this, and especially the tribes living on both sides of the border. They have the same language. They are from the same family. Sometimes the mosque is in Afghanistan, the village is in Pakistan. One family, the father is living in Afghanistan, the son is living in Pakistan. So that is the situation. In Pakistani establishment have this sense that if God forbid Afghanistan fall again into chaos, so there will be more, and already Pakistan is facing a militancy problem, specifically in the Pashtun belt. This is the Pakistani tribal area, or the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region. Already they are facing it. So that is and the other is the independent view. Pakistani intellectuals, intelligentsia, they are looking forward. They understand. They have a confidence in the Afghan political leadership. They will work it out, because international is not a problem. a solution for the Afghan problems. They understand that the Afghan problem will be resolved by the Afghan themselves, and even they are pressurizing the Pakistani government also to let the Afghan resolve their problems, and they succeeded somehow in forcing the Pakistani government or the establishment to change their policy toward Afghanistan. Previously, Pakistan was talking about a friendly regime in Kabul, but now they have changed this policy, and they are talking about a stable Afghanistan. Yesterday we were having an interaction with the Pakistani embassy people here in Kabul, and we were talking about these things, and I think we were somehow confident that yes, what they are saying, that is the feeling what we are getting in Islamabad, that Pakistan is no more going for favorites, whether it is the Pashtun Afghan, Pashtun Tajik, Pashtun Uzbek, Pashtun Hazara, etc. Pakistan is going for Afghanistan. This is what we are feeling, and we are looking forward to it. And I think there is a pressure on the Pakistani establishment also to change its whole policy vis-a-vis Afghanistan, work for Afghanistan, work for the people of Afghanistan, instead of allying itself with the particular ethnic community in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Mujib, let's come to you and ask you and have your comments about what Hasan Khan told about the perception of Pakistan toward Afghanistan. Or you agree with that or you not, and what is the reality? Is it, or you agree or not?
I think among the peoples there's definitely an understanding that it's shared challenges between the two countries, extremism and also the economic instability in both countries. But I would disagree with Hasan Khan in the sense that the establishment's view towards Afghanistan, I think we need to differentiate in that. One is the military view, one is the civilian view. On the Afghan side, as a journalist, I've definitely sensed a change in the civilian view towards Afghanistan for the past 2 years. At least there's a facade. The Foreign Ministry of Pakistan keeps on putting out very strong statements in support of the peace process, in support of the Afghan-led peace process. But I would not be convinced until I see a similar commitment from the military side. I think at least I haven't seen any evidence from the military side of Pakistan, which usually controls foreign policy. The foreign ministry and the civilian government becomes really a spokesperson for whatever policy the military chooses, especially towards the regional countries. So from the military, I don't think I've seen a change in their view towards Afghanistan. I think they still differentiate between good Taliban and bad Taliban. They don't see extremism as a shared challenge. They see the Pakistani Taliban as a danger and a challenge to Pakistan and to Pakistan's democracy. But the Taliban in Afghanistan, I have seen no moves on part of the Pakistani military to curb that side of extremism. I think they're both hand in hand, the Pakistani and the Afghan Taliban. But I think the military view, when we talk about the Pakistani establishment, I think they still haven't made that commitment to go after the Afghan Taliban as well. I think on the civilian side we've seen a change, but on the military side I don't think.
And also one another question: most of the Pakistani, as Hasan Khan, think that the problems in Afghanistan should be solved by Afghans and no need for international solution. How you would agree with this or not?
I think Pakistan needs to play an important role because the leadership of the insurgency in this country operates out of Pakistan. The Pakistani government no longer denies that the senior leadership of the Taliban operates out of Quetta, operates out of Karachi, operates out of Peshawar and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So if that's the case, Pakistan needs to be an important player. Yes, it needs to be an Afghan-led process. Afghans need to get their side together in terms of politics. But when it comes to negotiating with the Taliban, when it comes to a long-term solution to the instability and to the extremism, Pakistan needs to be a key player because they have given refuge to a leadership of an insurgency that has waged war over the past 10 years.
Thank you. SURAIL, let's come to you and ask you about the concerns which have been raised by MUJIB MASHAL in here. Most of the people of Afghanistan think like this. What is your response to these concerns?
Sure. Yeah, I think MUJIB is largely right, but from the Pakistani point of view, I think and when I say the Pakistani point of view, I'm referring to the Pakistan army because that controls Afghan policy. The civilians have zero input in that. several things have happened, I think, in recent months, if not over the last couple of years. One, a realization has sunk in that 2014 is not really the end game that it had been made out to be. That perhaps the game is no longer about what will happen come January 1st, 2015, but 2017, 2018, 2019 and onwards. So I think the time frames have shifted a little bit. There's an understanding perhaps now on the Pakistani side that as soon as the Western troops wind down their combat operations, it won't mean that the Taliban will come in and sweep through Kabul, etc. The second thing is, I think there's a sense amongst perhaps our security establishment, as we call it, that they would prefer a political settlement as opposed to a civil war in Afghanistan. This was the logical assumption for a long time, that the Pakistan army or the establishment would not mind if Afghanistan imploded again, because they would then come in and pick up the pieces. But I think now there's a sense that the army would prefer, as a first option, to have a political settlement, which means obviously with the Afghan Taliban, that they should be given their quote-unquote rightful place in whatever post-2014 framework that you have in Afghanistan. And I think two other things are animating their thinking. Number one is the presidential election in this country next year, and I believe parliamentary elections later in the year. And what kind of dispensation emerges in Afghanistan? I think Karzai is viewed in Pakistan or by the establishment as an erratic, perhaps unreliable figure who the Afghan Taliban may not want to negotiate with come what may. And the fourth thing is, I think there's a sense that the incoherence of American policy towards Afghanistan, until they sort of lay down their cards, okay, this is what we plan to do, more than just, well, we're withdrawing troops and this is the timeline and 34,000 are going to be gone by this time next year and this will happen by December 2014. But I think the Pakistan establishment is looking towards the Americans to see what they have in mind for Afghanistan going forward, and then they will sort of adjust their own decisions and their own choices within that framework. So I think this is a period of wait and see, really. I mean, I think I'd agree with, you know, it might sound contradictory, but both Hasan and MUJIB, which is that the army, its long-standing strategic approach to Afghanistan has not changed. But I think there's a pause right now, a willingness to perhaps consider something else if the chips fall in place, if circumstances allow it. And that's my sense, is that the first preference would be for a political settlement in Afghanistan. But perhaps in a sense that maybe here in Afghanistan would be understood differently. And within Pakistan it would mean the Afghan Taliban having a substantial role in whatever dispensation emerges subsequently.
Thank you. And Wade, let's have your comments about what we have talked yet.
I would say, I would build on what our friend SURAIL just said, that the Pakistani establishment, the Pakistani army take or approach towards Afghanistan hasn't changed, unfortunately, over the past 3 decades. And I think now is time for it at least to change. If it was to work towards Afghanistan, we tried that for 3 decades, at least for the past 10 or 12 years after 2011. We had enough time, and we realized, and I hope our friends in Pakistan also realize, that this policy doesn't work. So this is time for change. Afghanistan is going through change, and we not only need our international allies here to help us embrace the new Afghanistan post-2014, but also countries in the region. We have an expression in Dari in our language which says, you can choose who your friends are, but you cannot choose who your neighbors are. So you have to do with whoever your neighbor happens to be. I would also agree with the point our colleague Hasan Khan made, that there aren't that many Pakistani journalists based in Afghanistan. While we are neighbors, we have a lot in common, and there aren't that many Afghan journalists based in Pakistan reporting directly from Pakistan. We take most of the material we report from international media, and we all work in media. We know that our audience is the heart of our work. So most of what is written, reported out of Afghanistan by international media is for their audience. So that may not fit very well for Pakistani audience, and same might be the case for Afghanistan.
Wait, short and fair. Is it because of the political problems between Afghanistan and Pakistan and misconfidence which is in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
That is the point I wanted to make. Is it is rather strange that why do we not have that? It just doesn't happen to be an incident. It seems that there isn't political will behind that. So we in the region, we and Pakistan have to live together, no matter what happens to be the international approach towards Afghanistan and Pakistan in the region. We are affected by each other. What goes in Pakistan has direct effects on Afghanistan, and vice versa. So we have to come closer, not only the media community, but the public, the ordinary people, the common man between Afghanistan and Pakistan need to understand each other better, and their information or their take of situation in Afghanistan shouldn't be fueled, shouldn't be pumped through the establishment, through the military take on Afghanistan. And if there is direct, impartial reporting from Afghanistan what Afghans think about the Pakistani people in general and about the establishment, and then that would also help a little bit to clear the cloud which exists. We cannot ignore the cloud which exists between the two countries. So that would be a step towards a positive and peaceful future that we both countries hope for.
So, Mujib, you want to say something?
I wanted to ask Pakistani friends, I wonder, because the events in Afghanistan shape so much in Pakistan as well, the recent events, but the lack of the media presence in Afghanistan, does that mean there's an assumption behind that anything substantial that might happen in Afghanistan, the source for that change is actually close to home, the establishment in Pakistan, so you could get that information from there without having to really...
I mean, it's possible to read too much into it. If you just Pakistan has no journalists in India. No Pakistani news organization has a journalist in India. My newspaper has a correspondent in the US, but no other organization does. They tend to be stringers and other people. So it's not Afghan specific. I think it's about how the Pakistani media is set up. And perhaps looking from the Afghan side, you might assume, well, perhaps that's the reason. But it's the overall...
And India.
I mean, you know, if Pakistanis don't have journalists in India, then I think that's an order of interest much greater than Afghanistan. But, I mean, in the interest of frankness, because we were talking earlier, I absolutely agree with what Wahid's saying about what needs to be done. But I think before we figure out what needs to be done, we also have to challenge some assumptions, where you said that the establishment's policy hasn't worked in Afghanistan. But that's not how the establishment would view it, and that's the point. So if it is in fact viewed as a reasonably successful approach over the last 3 decades, which now has had adverse consequences for Pakistan in terms of our own problems with militancy internally, that's the link which is really sort of alerting the security establishment to perhaps the entire framework being flawed. But I don't believe that they fundamentally think that the policy is a failed policy. I think they believe that the policy, from their point of view, from their narrow security prism, it actually has worked. Because here you've had 11 years of a superpower billeted in your backyard, i.e. Afghanistan, and you know you've come out of this period largely with the chips still in your hand, in your side, and you still have cards to play. So I think, again, I mean, good or bad, right or wrong, those are moral judgments that we can impose on this. But since we're talking about relations between states and how it's a very tough neighborhood, we need to be clear about exactly how the principal players are viewing it. And I'm not sure that this idea that it would be viewed fundamentally as a failed policy is at all true. I think it might actually be viewed as in a difficult world being the least worst of options so far.
Just about this, I think I started my statement from beginning with the media, that we don't have the direct interactions, media interaction. Otherwise, people have a lot of interactions. Particularly, we have more than 20-25,000 people are daily crossing on different border points. I think in Pakistan, this is the classical view what we are taking about the military establishment, that powerful in Pakistan. During the last 5 years, a lot of water has flown under the bridge, and I think the Foreign Office, and you look at the Pakistani ambassador behavior in Kabul. Previously, they were not that forthcoming, they were not that independent. Which presently, I think this is my personal view, the present ambassador is behaving in Kabul. he has, and that is the change which we are looking at. That now Pakistan is now, and now even the Pashtun Afghans are feeling that that Pakistan has changed its policy toward the north, and it may be there may be certain reason behind it. Other thing is that during the last 5 years, too many things happened in Pakistan. The Pashtun population in Pakistan is, I think, somehow bigger than Afghanistan. We have almost 20 million around Pashtun in Pakistan. Only in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So there is Karachi, there is Balochistan, and there is the rest of the country dispersed everywhere. So when the Afghan policy, the Pakistan policy vis-a-vis Afghanistan during the last 20 or 30 years, it has impacted the Pashtun population, whether it is in the tribal area, whether it is in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or even in Balochistan. So this is, and now once the Pashtuns are infested in Pakistan, so the Pashtuns are everywhere in Pakistan. It's not only they are restricted to the Pashtunkhwa or to Balochistan. They are in majority in Karachi, they are in Lahore, they are in Pindi, they are in almost in every province. They have a sizable number there. So once you are disturbing and the Pakistani Pashtun and the Afghan Pashtuns, they have almost, I think, the same feeling for each other. That is the reason that Pakistan could not succeed to check the border point, whether it is at Torkham, it is at Ghulam Khan, or it is at Chaman, or elsewhere at Bajawal or at Tira, etc. So my view is that due to the continuous disturbances now, post 2000, I think it's post 2001, the situation in Pakistan has drastically changed, and this is also, I think, forcing, or I think the military establishment. The military establishment is not, yes, still it is in the back seat, but not that influential. It is not in the driving seat. You can say it is in the front seat, sorry. You can say it is in the front seat, but it is not in the driving seat. As far as Afghan policy is concerned, because there is too much. The Pakistani ambassador has visited to the north and going to the mausoleum of MASOUD, Ahmad Shah MASOUD, Shaheed, and such like, taking the Pakistani embassy from a more secure area to an area which is proverbially dominated by a certain ethnic community, presumably hostile, historically hostile to Pakistan. But now the Pakistani embassy is housed at a locality in Kabul, where even the Kabuli Pashtuns and even in Pakistan, the perception is that it may not be a secure place, because historically, or if you go by the classical definition of the Afghan ethnicities, that particular ethnicity is considered as to be hostile to Pakistan. These things, I think, the Pakistani Prime Minister visit to Pakistan, most of his interaction with a particular Afghan leadership in Afghanistan, it shows that Pakistan has now that favorite somehow. I'm not saying that it has taken a U-turn. Somehow there are changes, and I feel that these are positive changes. You can't say the foreign policy of a country like Pakistan, a country like India, a country like another stable country, somehow stable country, that can't change overnight. But you have to feel the changes, you have to perceive the changes. I personally, as an observer of Afghan politics or the Afghan conflict, I feel that there are changes. There may not be the U-turn, may not be the 160-degree change, but there are changes.
Thank you. Because of a technical problem we have to take a break, and after that we will continue. بیننده های عزیز، پس از یک وقفه کوتاه ادامه میدیم که نگرانی های افغانستان چیست و نگرانی های پاکستان در افغانستان چی است. با ما باشید. Bazam Khush Ahmed, respected guests, I want to mention that there are two Pakistani journalists in this discussion and 2 Afghans. I'm interfering very less because it's fair that you can guys feel free talking with each other or interfering, and you just feel free.
Okay.
MUJIB, let's come to concerns from public opinions of Afghanistan. Sometimes Afghan people accuse Pakistan for some points. Could you please tell us about this accusation?
I'll come to the accusation, but I wanted to comment on what Hasan Khan said. The Pakistani officials, the embassy officials, meeting with politicians outside the the traditional
the Prime
sphere,
Minister.
the Prime Minister. I don't think it's necessarily a change of policy as it is diversifying their investments. It would be a change of policy if it was happening instead of harboring Taliban leadership. It's happening in conjunction with that. It's happening at the same time. So in a way, I would agree with SURAIL that that Pakistan is sitting and waiting to see what's going to happen, but at the same time they're investing in other political circles, all the while keeping their interests, keeping their leash on the Taliban leadership. And to me, what's really fascinating is when the subject of a change in Pakistan policy comes, is that Pakistan is doing this instead of working with a legitimate central government of Afghanistan. There is an authority. The demands that the government has for cooperation are not met. The government tried to launch an ulama council to ban suicide bombings, to have a religious view expressed on suicide bombings from an Islamic perspective. An invitation was extended to the Pakistani ulama. They refused to join. If suicide bombings is as much a problem to Pakistan, which it is, I think every day we hear reports. In a way, there's a perspective among Afghans that Pakistan is actually, certain cities in Pakistan is more insecure than Afghanistan in terms of violence. Quetta, Peshawar, Karachi, the number of incidents that happen. So if this is a shared challenge, if suicide bombings is a shared challenge, why don't Pakistani ulama feel the urge to cooperate and join us in this discussion? So yes, there are steps that are seeing, but I wouldn't say that's a change in policy as it is diversifying investment in case the outcome in Afghanistan changes, so they will be ready for that outcome as well. As to why there is a cynicism among Afghans towards Pakistan, towards Pakistani policy, I think it's a very justified cynicism. Yes, Pakistan is pushing for a political settlement right now, but they're pushing for a political settlement with Taliban. So Afghans, an average Afghan says, okay, if you're pushing Taliban to negotiate and to have a share in power, you kept Taliban as a player in this game for 10 years, and now you're pushing them to negotiate. Certainly you have an investment in it. It's not just for the sake of security, stability, and for the sake of cooperation. It's actually, you had a game in mind. The cynicism in a way is justified because the Pakistani leadership did not go after Taliban, and now they're pushing them as a player in this game, in negotiations, to have a stake in the future of Afghanistan. So I think the cynicism among the Afghans, the blame game, that's the reason for it. That Pakistan, they feel that Pakistan kept Taliban as a player to have it as a stake in the future of the country.
Just a small comments about the Taliban presence in Afghanistan. I think historically, if we look at Afghanistan and Pakistan, all the bad boy in Pakistan would have taken refugees in. We were having supposedly the anti-Pakistan elements staying here in Afghanistan. This is historical fact. All the bad boy of Afghanistan, the bad boy of the regime. I'm not talking of the political bad boy. The bad boy of the regime. When all the Afghans were fighting against the Russians, so there was a legitimate somehow. I'm not contradicting whether that was a political or not. But to me, Dr. MUJIB or that was a regime there when he was here. So most of the Afghans, those who were fighting against the regime, were in Pakistan. After that, when the Mujahideen, when the Islamists took over in Kabul, so the rest of all, whether they were Khalqi, Parchamis, or the nationalists, they were in Peshawar and Quetta. And still, this most of the time I'm talking about it, that most of the Afghan, they have bloods in the streets of Peshawar and Quetta. And then when Taliban took over, I think all these still, most of the Afghan commanders, most of, if not is an exaggeration, most of the Afghan elites, they have houses, whether it is from Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara, Pashtun, etc. They have houses in Quetta, they have houses in Islamabad, they have houses in Peshawar. Even the top political leaders, they have houses in Islamabad. The problem is, I think we need to look at the reality. The reality is, yes, Pakistan was having a bad Afghan policy during the last 2 or 3 decades. It was, but Pakistan suffered a lot. Now, what I feel in Afghanistan, this is an Afghan problems. They have to sit together. Talib is an Afghan. Tajik is an Afghan, Pashtun is an Afghan, all ethnicities are Afghan, number one. Talib is an Afghan, Mujahid is an Afghan, Khalqi is an Afghan, Parchim is an Afghan. I think if this hurt is open by all the Afghan to each other, because you can't resolve a problem by shedding more and more blood. Why you are giving Pakistan space to interfere in Afghan affair? Why you are giving space? Now there are talks of Iran interfering in Afghan affairs, in Afghanistan affair. Now there are talks of Iran supporting the Taliban. Because the problem is that Afghan themselves, they are not sitting together. They are, I'm sorry to use the word, for sale. Sometimes Afghan leaders, whether it is in our part, whether I'm a Pashtun myself, I'm an Afghan myself, we have seen that our leaders were for sale, whether they were across the border or on this side of the border. As long as the Afghan do not realize that all are Afghans, whether he is from Kandahar, whether he is from Kunduz, whether he is from Farah, whether he is from Helmand, all have to sit together and all have to participate in this process. If you say Taliban should be away, if you say Mujahideen should not participate in it, if you say that Khalki and Parchami, they are the Russian bloc, and this is the Saudi bloc, this is the American bloc. What the Afghani media, I think what I would suggest to do is to have a larger, broad-based Afghan national debate. That all those Afghans, like look, we have a reconciliation in South Africa. We have reconciliation in other countries. If they sit together, if the white and black sit together, if the Muslim and the Christian sit together, why the Afghans, who are Muslims, who are Afghans, they are suffering alike? Why all the Afghans are not? Forget about Pakistan, forget about Iran, forget about the Russian, forget about the Saudis. I think this should be the debate in Afghanistan, that Talib is an Afghan, Mujahid is an Afghan, sorry, Khalki is an Afghan, a Parchami is an Afghan, whether he is living in Kandahar, whether he is living in Mazar, whether he is living in Shabargan, whether he is living in Farah or Herat, etc. I think only then...
Let's come to you back.
I think it's blurring the narrative a little bit. Yes, traditionally, historically, the bad boys of Afghanistan have sought refuge in Pakistan. And the other way, exactly. But this time around, the difference is that Pakistan was a signatory to this war on terror 10, 12 years ago. So this was happening while Pakistan agreed with the policy of going after Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The context, this is the difference in the context. That this was a double game, when we see it as a double game, because Pakistan initially offered...
I'm not supporting the Taliban housing in Afghanistan, but what I am saying, that we have to look at Afghan problem from an Afghan angle, not from a US angle, not from a Pakistani angle, not from a Saudi angle, not from an Iranian angle. What I'm saying, Al-Qaeda is something different.
Again, far be it for Pakistani to tell Afghans how to run their country, because we're not doing a very good job of running our own country. But, you talked about it being a legitimate government, etc. Fine, there was an election. But the problem is, this government, the Karzai era, regime, whatever you want to call it, has squandered a historic opportunity that could have been used had he not perhaps had other motives or intentions or paranoia, fears, or sort of scapegoating and blaming outsiders, etc. Everyone knows what's going on. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Sure, there's a certain policy, and Iran has a policy, and Pakistan has a policy, and Saudi Arabia has a policy, and the Central Asian republics have a policy, and the Americans are trying to do something. I don't think anyone really doesn't know what people are trying to do in Afghanistan, right? But at some point, just like within Pakistan, for example, we're struggling with a breakout, an epidemic of internal militancy within Pakistan, and we don't have any idea how to fix it as yet, right? And this is something we perhaps nurtured over the years. For your country, here in Afghanistan, I mean, if you're going to say, well, everything would be hunky-dory if only Pakistan stopped doing A, or everything would be great if only Iran stopped doing B, or everything would be great if only the Americans just, stopped doing C. Well, that's not going to happen. So in that space, what can Afghans themselves do to try and create further space for themselves? And I think my sense is that the last 10 years were a historic opportunity that were utterly squandered. Now you can go back into the history of why Karzai came in and how he came in and with whom support and whatever. But the Afghan people themselves are deeply divided. And the Afghan people, just like I think Hassan was trying to flag, ultimately Pakistan's a divided society too. And therefore we have these problems. So outsiders exploit problems when you give them the space to. For example, in Balochistan in Pakistan, we have had a long-running separatist insurgency. It's not Islamist in nature at all. It's very secular. They want to break away from Pakistan. Pakistan, this establishment is convinced that a lot of this is happening because of the outside world. But actually the truth is, well, our policies over the years have alienated the Baloch within Pakistan.
So let me have a question that the people want to know, as you journalists come from Pakistan. What are the main concern of Pakistan in Afghanistan? I mean, sometimes the people of Afghanistan urge that Pakistan is not agree with influence of India in Afghanistan for being of the, as you mentioned, the Balochistan leader in Afghanistan, and also in these days you have heard about the news of the Pakistani Taliban leader being arrested inside Afghanistan. Let us know about concerns that Pakistan have from in Afghanistan.
I mean, when you're talking about Pakistan policy towards Afghanistan, you have to separate sort of popular opinion and what the military does or wants. So I think it makes most sense to talk about what the security establishment, how it perceives Afghanistan, because they run our policy towards Afghanistan. I, as a citizen, do not, and I have no input, nor does my civilian government have any input in that. Several things. I mean, obviously the India angle is known, and it's a historic thing where the army, because of the way Pakistan's configured in its geography, is worried about encirclement, and because of the history of partition, etc., particularly paranoid about Indian influence. I think beyond that, there's also a concern about American troops being in our backyard. Obviously we're a nuclear power, which often makes the outside world unhappy, so the army becomes more and more concerned about perhaps there could be some kind of attempt to take out our nuclear arsenal. I'm just talking in the world of how security analysts within our army would look at these things in hard terms. And of course, I think ultimately, when you look at Afghanistan, there's a temptation to view Pakistan's Afghan policy to be this kind of very macho sort of policy. Well, it's our backyard, we can do whatever we want, or the army can. I think really it's rooted in fear, and that once you understand that the policy is actually not about necessarily, well, this is an expansionist project for Pakistan, but it's actually rooted in fears about Pakistan's own regional security, that's when you can start to perhaps find common ground, if there's any, in these issues. Because I don't think that the army does what it does only because it views Afghanistan as something that's it's just its backyard and controls. But it views, if, for example, I think a general in our army would think or argue that if Pakistani influence in Afghanistan waned, someone else's influence would increase. And that would necessarily be to Pakistan's disadvantage. So the thinking is a zero-sum kind of game, that the entire mindset is that way. If Pakistan's influence in Afghanistan goes down, and then India's influence must go up, which means that it hurts Pakistan somehow. Then once you break out of somehow, and I don't think anyone has answers to these things for sure, definitely not in the next couple of years. Once you break out of that zero-sum mentality, which is our loss is someone else's gain and therefore it will hurt us even more, until then you're stuck.
So you will comment, Wahid, because you have talked less than others.
Yeah, I agree with all our friends in this panel, or whatever they've said. Unfortunately, that's the reality. The real reality is that when India tries to have an Afghan government, or trying to have friendly relationships within the legitimate space that countries have to have influence in India. The one is the legitimate space or sphere that every country can have their interest, pursue their interest in another country. One is the internationally accepted, illegitimate red line that you cannot cross that. That's where most ordinary Afghans and most Afghan politicians that we talk to as journalists on a daily basis, that's where the main frustration comes from. As our friend Hassan Khan said earlier, that most of the Afghan politicians, the players in the past 2 decades, have even houses and they enjoy a lot of freedom in Pakistan. That's by an ordinary Afghan, that's not perceived as Pakistan's hospitality towards Afghan. That's perceived as most people would say.
No, I'm not talking about hospitality.
Yeah, that's what most people would say. Pakistan trying to cross that red line, trying to support people, specific circles in Afghanistan for its own national interest. That's, well, now what is that national interest? As SURAIL said, that today Pakistan is concerned about its own internal stability as well. So why is that? Why do we have the rise of militancy within Pakistan itself? Again, most Afghans, and we have seen in roundtables in Afghanistan, Afghans use this expression very often. The snake that you breathe in your sleeve would come and would return and bite you one day. That's the perception Afghans have about the security in Pakistan and in Afghanistan itself. That's what people talk about in the past 10 years. So most ordinary Afghans are for a great, secure, stable Pakistan, which is in the interest of Afghanistan. And at the same time, they say if we want to have good, stable and balanced relations in the region with Pakistan and with India, more with Pakistan than with India because India is more distant. Well, that's what we don't see from Pakistan's side. Pakistan wants to have not a stable Afghan government in its backyard, but a government that is what Pakistan calls its friendly government, which we all know what does that mean. Well, would Taliban, a re-emergence of Taliban in some sort, be a friendly government towards Pakistan? I don't think so. That is seen as a puppet government again. So these are the concerns that people have, and if there is political will, approaching to these...
I'd just like to say one thing, I'm just building on what Hasan said. Again, that's one way of looking at it. I think that's a historical way of looking at it. And to a large point, that was true. But I think at the present moment, the issue is really, can you, the Afghans, get your own act together also? And if you do get your act together, would Pakistan actively intervene? And I think we're now in a phase where if for whatever reason, and obviously you can't wipe away history and you can't just wash it away, but I think there's a sense that if at this moment somehow within Afghanistan there's an internal consensus on a government of your own choosing, I'm not sure the Pakistani establishment will try to knock it out. As long as now the question is that exercising a veto, saying no, that we must have the Afghan Taliban as central players? I don't think so. I think the question is, I just want to say, if the government or if this system out here were stable internally, I don't see what Pakistan can do to actually just,
because of the diversity, let's have first Wahid and then you.
To answer the question, can the Afghans get their act together? Speaking from what I get from talking to ordinary Afghans, I'm not representing anybody here, but the Afghans and myself. I think Afghanistan was and still is on the right track of getting its act together. What does that mean? Well, post 2011, the process started with election, with democracy, and I don't think there is anything wrong with that. All different political figures in the country who came from different ideologies, even the communists, the mujahideen, the right wing, the left wing, everybody, they came and they sat around one table for a greater Afghanistan and for a stable future. What the concern here is military direct support to the armed oppositions of the Afghan government. That is beyond getting political act together. The common Afghan sees that there is a direct military support behind those groups who are against the political settlement in Afghanistan. Now, this goes beyond the democratic ways and values.
Can I ask you a question? If this, hypothetically speaking, if this military assistance, as you referred to it, call it, were to be cut off, do you think that there would be an internal consensus in Afghanistan?
I believe if the military support and the regional support for Taliban did not exist.
I would wonder if after a lot of fighting with these people, the Afghan Taliban, if their patrons, as you were describing them, were suddenly to say, okay, no more, we're not going to do this, would they then be adjusted within a political setup in Afghanistan?
I don't think we need to look at it hypothetically, because we have seen examples of it in real life. Look at the Afghan parliament today. People who were fighting each other in the past, they're sitting next to each other, and they have a common approach towards what we call a common good for the country. So we don't have enough time, as the presenter says, but we can give you tens of examples of that happening today. So it's a reality.
Please have.
What we, the journalists, are doing, especially in Afghanistan and even in Pakistan too, we are always prone to picking the bad points, the bad things between the Pakistani and Afghan relation. I think, realistically speaking, this time it's only Pakistan which is friend of Afghans. Like, look, you have been encircled by Iran, not letting you to enter there, and you are not allowed by Tajik. Me and SURAIL were there at Mazar. We were told that a lady who fall in Afghanistan, it is the only Peshawar where she can go there and she can be treated. And it is only the Pakistan embassy which is saying, oh no, these are the good things. there are few bad things. Yes, strategically, Pakistan's historic policy toward Afghanistan was flawed. Historically, it was flawed. Now this is as an Afghan Pashtun, myself saying that there is a shift in Pakistan policy. What the Afghan journalists, what the Afghan media, what the Afghan intelligentsia need to do, you still have 2.5 million Afghan in Pakistan. You still, all your dependence is on Torkham and on Chaman border and on Ghulam Khan border. I think what we need to do is to pick up the good points. Let's work on it, bring the people together, build a confidence. Now what is happening in Kabul and in Mazar and in Jalalabad and maybe in Herat and in Helmand and Kandahar, all the few things bad is done by the Pakistani establishment historically, are not narrated time and again, and they have been formed they have been given as narratives in Afghanistan. What we need to do, if we are the friends of Afghans, if we are the friends of Pakistan, I think we need to talk of the peoples to peoples, between the two peoples, the context between the two people. Pakistanis are still open-hearted. I'm talking of the Pakistani people, not let's forget about the establishment. Today, right now, when we people are sitting here talking bad of Pakistan, thousands of people are waiting at the Torkham border, crossing to Peshawar, crossing to Chaman, crossing to Ghulam Khan checkpoint. So what I will suggest to the Afghani media and to the Afghani intelligentsia, they forget about these cliches. These are the cliches. Americans have been failed in Afghanistan. Now they are transferring all the burden toward Pakistan. Saudis have done a lot bad in this country. Nobody is talking of Saudi. This is the Saudi Wahhabi Islam which has destroyed this whole Afghanistan. Anybody in Afghanistan is talking about it? No.
Hasan Khan, you have talked from what Pakistani people want from Afghans. Let's have from Afghani. Because of limitation of the time, we cannot continue.
We have never said we're not grateful to the hospitality Pakistan has provided to our refugees. There's always that sense of gratefulness, even today. But I think it would be building a fake facade if we only focused on the positives. Every day on the internal local media, we bash the politicking, how our politicians don't get along. We do it, but when it comes to foreign policy, we can't focus on the Afghan their political problems, on the infighting between politicians, and forget about the real cause, the real root of militancy still. Yes, you can talk about, as MASOUD said, there's evidence that every other player outside the Taliban has participated in this political process over the past 10 years. The only forces that have remained outside has been Hizb Islami.
Taliban are there in disguise. Some official positions who are holding official position in the Taliban period, they are holding very much important position in this current regime.
Well, they are.
If you allow me, I can name.
They're civilians living.
They were there. They were very important officials. Amr bil Maruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, important officials.
Yes. But
they were important ministers in the Taliban era, and they were part of the High Peace Council and this current parliament.
But even they themselves would not.
I know we are running up, but just a quick question
for you gentlemen. If inside Pakistan we are unable to defeat our Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban, and I think this we can agree that perhaps the Pakistan army, the ones who are attacking the state, want to defeat at least those forces within the country. Leave aside these other groups, the so-called Gul Taliban, and we're unable to do it. So why the assumption that you can do it in Afghanistan? I just. If we are the creators,
guys,
and
we cannot continue anymore because of limitation of the time. Thank you very much, respected guests, for your kind discussion. I'm grateful all of you. And سپاسگزار از شما بیننده های عزیز که تاییدم برنامه آماجتون بال کردید. تا دیدار بعد، خدا نگهدار.